Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Speed Reading 101 podcast. I'm Paul Novak, the founder of Iris, and along with me, as usual, is one of our instructors, Joe Rodriguez. I'm broadcasting today from Chicago, and Joe is broadcasting from Toronto. Hey, Joe.
Hey, Paul. Hey, everyone. Just a quick reminder, check out our course schedules and look for a city near you, one of our workshops near you at irisreading.com. And just to remind everyone, you can get a 25% discount on all our classes if you enter the promo code speedreadingzone.com during checkout. And also check out my speed reading blog at speedreadingzone.com.
Today our topic is speed reading myths, and we've got a number of them that we want to talk about. All these speed reading myths are things that people believe that aren't necessarily true about speed reading. And I want to start off, Joe, talking about when I was first, developing the program that we teach for the Iris classes, I was really bothered by the fact that there was a lot of exaggeration in the world of speed reading. For example, when I was looking into it, I remember reading a book that told me, read this book, you're going to end up reading 20 times faster with perfect comprehension. And it's so easy. Joe, you want to comment on that? This is the exaggeration that really frustrated me, and this is part of the reason why I thought a lot of it was BS.
Yeah, I've been into speed reading for about 10 years, and I got into it because I had to take in a lot of information for technology. I used to work in a company in the IT department, and I used to do a lot of reading to keep up to date with the latest technology. And I kind of, over the years, it took me a while to build up my speed. I'm not saying that it should take that long. I read about 600 words per minute right now, which is about 3 times faster than the general population. And if I look at how much work I put into it over the years, it's a steady amount of work. So I don't see how that is true. Like, I haven't personally tried out one of those courses that make those kind of claims, but I have used different software and stuff that does work, but I never actually personally got those kind of results.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same with me. In terms of reading speed, when I read this book on speed reading, originally it probably helped me just a little bit. I mean, I think I started out around the average, around 200 words a minute, and I probably got up to like 250 or 300. Now, the problem with this book was I basically just read it and didn't do much of the application. So it would tell me, try this exercise. And I would read it, and I would say, oh, that sounds like a cool exercise. I'll try it later. Let me finish the chapter. And I read through this book basically cover to cover. And it's kind of like, imagine if you read a book that said, let's say they were guitar lessons, or you're trying to learn the piano, or any other kind of instrument. And it says, read this book, and you'll learn how to play this instrument. You could read that book 100 times. It doesn't mean you're going to know anything about actually playing the instrument. You might know the theory and how to read notes and things like that, but application is a whole other thing. Once I started doing actual drills and exercises, that's when I was able to start boosting my reading speed. And right now, if you gave me maybe medium level material, I know you mentioned you're going about 600 words a minute.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to do is just kind of qualify what this means. When we're talking about our reading speed, usually it depends on the scenario. So, Joe, I think when you're saying 600 words a minute, you're talking about like average level material, right? Like not too easy, not too hard, right?
Yes.
And that's what I usually talk about, but I always want people to know, because some people think that your reading speed is this one number that you always read at. So for me, if you gave me medium level material, and I'm sure it's the same with you, Joe, I could read it 600 to 700 words a minute depending on my purpose. I might even go 800 words a minute. Now, if that material was extremely simple, like let's say we're reading Dr. Seuss, The Cat in the Hat, I might go 1,000 words a minute because that is really simple to go through. Now, on the other hand, I think if both of us, if we're reading really technical material, let's say it's a advanced level physics, well, I'm going to have to slow it down. I might go 300, 400, 500 words a minute depending on my purpose, depending on how familiar am I with that particular topic in physics.
Yeah, and I'm also going to vary my speed when I'm reading that kind of material.
Exactly.
You're right about that. I don't read the study material and the heavy technical stuff at 600 words per minute. I mean, that's just doesn't work. I mean, it's not practical, first of all, because what you want to do is assimilate that information. And the more information that's condensed, and when that information contains certain terminology and references and all that kind of stuff, you've got to take some time to assimilate that. So it overall increases the amount of time you spent reading the subject, right? So what I have noticed is by applying the speed reading techniques and strategies, I still save a bunch of time when I'm reading the technical stuff because I vary my speed. I know when to speed up and I know when to slow down. And when I speed up, I get the higher speeds. And when I do slow down, I'm actually not slowing down to the point of what the average population reads at when they don't have any training on speed reading. I slow down to a lower level, but it's still a pretty fast speed.
Right, and I like to think of it kind of like when you're driving. I mean, when you drive, you don't always go the same exact speed. I mean, if you're in traffic, you're going to have to slow down. If you've got an open road and you're on the highway, you're going to obviously speed up. And I like to think of reading the same kind of way. When the environment gets a little more challenging, I might slow down a little bit. Or if my purpose is to, let me just get the bare bones, I'm going to speed up. Now, one of the myths that I want to talk about here is one myth that I hear commonly is speed reading's only good if it's really, really easy material. And the way I want to refute that myth is by saying that the goal of speed reading, or at least how we think of it, is we acknowledge that you have a reading range. You don't have one reading speed that you always go at. So you might read anywhere from 200 to 400 words a minute. And the goal of learning to read faster is to boost all your reading speeds, your entire range. So faster in your technical material, faster in the easy material, faster in the medium level material. And obviously you're never going to go as fast in technical material as you will in the easy stuff, but you can still improve that reading speed in the technical material. And not to mention, we're really not just talking about reading speed, it's also about efficiency, right, Joe?
Yeah. It's about time management. See, I think a lot of the myths that surround speed reading are based on a paradigm that you read a certain way and you follow that way, and that's the way you just have to go faster at that way that you're reading, and then you're going to get your high reading speeds. But the real paradigm, or the paradigm that exists when you want to increase your speed, as far as the speed reading, the realm of speed reading we cover, it involves reading strategies, reading styles, and all these other little variables that, when put into play, overall increase your reading speed. And a lot of it is not trying to scale your old style of reading. So it's a totally different style of reading, speed reading. And actually, the myths that exist are usually based on the old 70s style of speed reading. Speed reading has changed a lot over the last 10, 20 years. Now, and this is, IRIS focuses on all these new technologies that are out there, like RSVP or mind mapping, and also studies of the human brain and all these other things that's out there, and incorporates all that to overall deliver what speed reading is designed to do in the first place, and that is take in information faster, comprehend it better, and retain it longer. So to me, I don't want to speed read anything unless it accomplishes those three goals: take in information faster, comprehend it better, and retain it longer.
Right, and one of the big problems is everyone's overloaded with information. So I think our goal more so is not just about improving someone's reading speed, but helping them to kind of manage the overload of information that they have to deal with on a daily basis. A lot of the people coming to our classes are, business professionals and college students, and even some high school students. And they're think about how much information you're just getting thrown at you every single day. A lot of people just get behind and they get lost in it.
Yeah, I mean, there's more and more information becoming available on the internet today than ever before, and now with things like social media and people tweeting and Facebook messages and emails and just all this information that we've got coming to us, we've really got to look at how do we take in information in the most efficient way, and sometimes that means being selective on the information that you take in, and that's part of the strategies we teach.
Absolutely,
right?
Because it's not about it's not really about just going faster, first of all, even if you just end up going faster, you're never going to read all the material that's out there. There's just way too much. So being selective is incredibly important. And some people just feel like they have to read, some people say, I have to read every single word. Every single word is important. To that I usually reply, well, are all the words equally important? And why are you reading for words? Because a lot of people get caught up in the idea, and this is another myth, that I have to read each and every single word. And it's not about reading words. It's about reading for ideas and details and, like you said, getting information.
Yeah, taking in information and then being able to comprehend it well and then retain it longer so we can implement it. Or if you're reading for leisure, taking that information fast as far as like having a story playing in your head. That's the way I like to describe it. Because when you get really fast at reading, you kind of lose the fact or lose the idea that you're reading material, and you'll feel like a movie is playing in your head. That's the way I describe it.
Well, it's interesting you point that out. I want to get into one of our other topics here. We're mentioning before we started recording this podcast is, can you actually enjoy, we hear this all at the classes, can you enjoy the material if you're speed reading? Some people feel like if I go really, really slowly, I'll enjoy it more. Now, I think that might be true for certain things like poetry. That's absolutely true. I wouldn't use any speed reading technique on poetry, but on fiction, just because I'm going twice as fast as someone else, I don't think that means they're enjoying it more because they're going slowly. I enjoy getting through things fast. I enjoy not having to spend twice as much time on it and having that time for other things.
Well, think about a movie, right? A lot of movies are based on books. If you read the book, it's like 600-700 pages. How long is it going to take you to read that book, and how long is it going to take you to watch the movie? It's because when you're watching a movie, visually, there's a lot more information being presented.
That's true.
And it's going in through a way where you're still absorbing all that stuff, right?
And that's why you can compress that book into a 2-hour feature film.
Yeah, because you don't have to get into a lengthy description of what the character is wearing and
or the setting.
Or the setting, yeah. So we've got to take that approach. We've got to take that approach when we're reading, like taking in information, right? Because the word reading has got associations to it, like auditory reassurance. Like most of us, when we read in our head. And that's one of our things that keeps us from going to the next level, is when we read in our head.
Right, basically saying words in your head the way you would normally say them in conversation.
Exactly, and that's a common association with the word read, right? So we really want to reinvent what reading means, so to speak, if I can be so bold to say that.
I think you can, Joe. I think you can.
Well, you know what? From teaching these classes and just from experience, getting my speeds up to a certain level, I don't look at reading the same way as I used to when I first started speed reading. In fact, I don't even look at the term speed reading the same way as I used to look at when I went out looking for information for speed reading, right? Because I kind of just, I feel it more of, I call it more of taking in information. And I think when you say taking in information, you open up more senses. You allow yourself to look for more creative ways and more strategies and all that kind of stuff to actually absorb that information faster. Just like it would be if you were watching a movie, right? You're taking in a movie, you watch a movie, and there's emotions with it. There's feelings, there's audio, there's visuals. Sometimes there's even text in a video or in a movie if there's subtitles and whatnot. But you're taking information through a lot of different ways, and therefore it's more efficient. And what speed reading has evolved to right now is that truth, that there's a lot of different ways to take in information. So in our 5-hour workshops, they're very lengthy. We get into a whole lengthy discussion of all this. And that's the end result. That's the goal, is to be able to take in information faster using different techniques and strategies and senses. And
that's right, Joe.
Stimulus.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about our next myth here. The faster I read, the worse my comprehension gets. This is a very, very common myth about reading. So basically, if I go faster, I'm going to lose comprehension, and I'll understand more if I slow down. Now, here's how I want to destroy this statement. First of all, some people, let's say you're reading at 200 words a minute, and you've got a certain level of comprehension. You felt like you understood it. Does it mean that if I went at 100 words a minute, I'll understand it even more? Well, if that's the case, well, why not try going at 50 words a minute? Or cut it down to 25 words a minute, or 10 words a minute. You could keep going. Just because you're going lower and lower doesn't mean your comprehension's going higher and higher. And I think some people associate reading slowly with getting better comprehension, and it's something that I really want to dismantle because it's not true. And obviously, your reading speed requires a little bit of a balancing act. You can't go too fast because you will lose your comprehension, but you also can't go too slow because if you read too slowly, your brain is capable of processing so much information that if you're going too slowly, well, this is why our brain starts wandering off and thinking of other things. You're basically going to get bored.
Yeah, I read a study that the brain is capable of processing, average human being, most of us, everyone, is capable of processing around 600 to 1,000 words per minute. Now, what that means...
And the average reading speed is 200.
Yeah, the average reading speed is 200. So what that means is the brain is capable of processing that amount of information, 600 to 1,000 words per minute, right? Not actual, like, reading word for word 600 to 1,000 words per minute. And what I mean by that is right now when we're reading at 200 words per minute, there's mental processes going on in our brain, and our mind wanders, and there's other things that are other resources being used in our brain to, other things going on to use up those resources. We should pull those resources back and bring it into the task of reading, because then what we'll notice is not only we'll be able to read faster, but our comprehension will go up because those additional resources will be used to aid in comprehension.
Right. One of the things that just to kind of add to your point, going faster can sometimes improve your comprehension, and here's how. Sometimes if you force yourself to read a little faster, you end up forcing yourself to focus more. And if you're focusing a little better, you're going to have the benefit of getting better comprehension. And again, think about, if we could go back to our driving analogy, if you're driving, 3 miles per hour, you really don't have to focus that much, right? If you're going 70 miles per hour, you've got to focus a little more, or you're going to kill yourself.
If you're going 300 miles per hour, you get tunnel vision. Then you only have one line of focus.
Yes. So sometimes, again, going faster
300
is a
miles
way
or
to...
600 miles per hour. Well, there's a certain speed that you go where you'll start to see tunnel vision.
Really?
It's known that a certain speed, and you won't be able to see the stuff around you. You'll just kind of see straight, which is interesting because maybe that's what's really going on. When we start to, we're still digging into all the stuff involved with reading faster and comprehending information better and all that kind of stuff. But if you read faster, you push yourself to read faster, you could get that effect of focus and kind of tunnel vision in what you're reading, taking in that information better, more efficiently. Because the brain starts to zone in and it uses up all the resources to focus on what you are doing at that particular moment.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know what? In terms of focus, this is another big topic, and it's important in our classes. If you're not focusing, it doesn't matter how fast you're going. You could be going 200 words a minute, 400 words a minute, or 800 words a minute. If you have no focus, your comprehension is going to be gone. So really, it's not only a matter of how fast you're going that's going to determine your comprehension. It's a whole mess of other factors. It's, yes, it is how fast you're going. It's also how focused are you. It's also how familiar with the material are you. And all of that kind of goes into how well you understand the material.
Yeah, because if there's material that I'm very familiar with, and I were to read it, and let's say you, Paul, were not very familiar with that, chances are I would be able to read it a lot faster because those keywords and the information contained within that material, my brain's able to reference it a lot faster and causing me to read a lot faster.
Right, and let's say your mind wanders off for a moment while you're reading it, once your mind gets back into the zone and you're actually paying attention, you'll be able to still understand what's going on in material that's familiar with you. If my brain wanders off in material that I'm not familiar with, and then I try to get back into it, it's going to be really hard to get familiar with it. I have no familiarity with it at all. And this is why some people have to go back. And I mean, all of us have had this experience where we read a whole page and we look up like, I have no clue what I just read, and I've got to read it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the techniques actually you can do to increase your focus while you're reading is use your finger or a pen and underline each word or blocks of words that you go through as you read a line of text or line of information. Because what that does is brings in your focus to the tip of your finger, and you'll focus on the word above it. And the reason why that works is because our eyes fixate on moving objects. So you're kind of assisting your eyes and using it as a guide.
That's interesting. I also want to talk about, since we're on this topic of the faster I go, the worse my comprehension gets. And again, that's not something that's necessarily true, or it's not an eternal absolute truth. The idea that people change up their reading speed based on their scenario that they're in. One of the things that we've found, we've done this program in some of the high schools here in Chicago, and we've looked at people's reading speed when they're actually taking a test. And they end up reading more slowly when they're reading the test than when they're normally reading. And this is with similar kind of levels of material. So what's happening usually is a student gets put in a testing situation, and they know that after they read this passage, they've got to answer a whole bunch of questions. And they might even be a little nervous. And because of that, they end up going more slowly through the passage. The other thing is they end up, sometimes they feel like, you know what, I should go more slowly because otherwise I'm not going to remember things. And unfortunately, this is the reason why a lot of people don't finish the test. I mean, if you've ever taken one of those reading comprehension tests, sometimes they're really hard to finish because they give you very little time. And when a lot of students approach that test, they go in with the mindset, okay, I got to get comprehension. Let me go a little more slowly than I normally go. And it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get that better comprehension. And they end up affecting themselves negatively because by going more slowly, now they don't finish the test.
Yeah, and they're also using up more mental processes by being nervous.
Yeah.
And that obviously brings down your reading speed and comprehension level.
Confidence is key. Approach all your reading material like, you know what, this is advanced level neuroscience, but it's going to be a piece of cake.
Yeah. As weird as it sounds, that does really matter a lot when it comes to reading. Confidence does matter, like with anything in life.
Yeah, well, if you play, I've got a big background playing basketball, and if you're not confident on the court, I mean, if you feel like you're missing every single shot, and you're getting down on yourself that you can't hit a jumper, you're going to miss more jump shots. It's just that it applies to other sports too, and I think it applies to reading.
Yeah, and I suggest that you go and look up that study on how much information the brain is capable of processing, how many words the brain is capable of processing. And the goal should be to free up the resources so that we can take those resources and apply it to reading. I also recommend that you go out and study work by Peter Drucker. Now, I talk a lot about Peter Drucker in my classes because he's kind of he's the father of management, and he believes a lot about focused chunks of time and working on one thing at a time. Like, he's not a big advocate for, in fact, he's totally against multitasking. Mm-hmm. And when I started following his material, I started to go away from multitasking, and now I very rarely multitask. The only multitasking I think I do right now is I constantly check emails, but I'm working on that one. But
it's a tough one to get rid of. I've had issues with that as well. For example, a number of years ago, I got a phone that I could check my email, and it was great. And a lot of us have phones where you could check your email. Well, the problem was, think about most of the email that you get on a daily basis. Most of it is not. Some of it you don't even open. Some of it is just like a newsletter I signed up for, special offer from Amazon. That's junk mail. That's spam. Oh, a letter from my friend. Oh, it's a really long letter. I'll read it later. And what happened was every time I'd get an email, I'd get this little alert, and I would look at it. Oh, that's just a newsletter. Delete. And I would literally get distracted every 2 or 3 minutes because I was just constantly getting emails. Mm-hmm. And it was actually killing my productivity. Here's how I got rid of that, and it's a suggestion for some of you might want to take if you want to be so bold. turn off the email alerts on your phone. Check your email when you feel like checking your email, because the alerts, I feel like the alerts have really distracted me.
Mm-hmm. And don't listen to this podcast while driving.
Good point.
that's a joke, because I listen to a lot of
Don't listen to this podcast while you're reading.
Definitely not. No, you don't want to do that, because that's a lot of resources tying up, because we like to think that the information that we're presenting in this podcast is very dense, and we're taking up about 300-400 words a minute of those processes. So don't do it while you're reading. But yeah, you can do it while you're driving. I do listen to podcasts while I drive, and here's a little joke, is that I listen to them at double speed. Okay. So, it's speed listening, but nice. You can actually just jack up the speed a little bit, and you can still take in the information. But that's a whole other topic.
Well, some of our podcast listeners might be listening to us right now at double speed, Joe.
Yeah. So I try to talk a certain way so I won't sound like a chipmunk at double speed.
That's great.
But yeah, so it's not true that if you read, the faster you read, the comprehension will go down. Now, when you start applying speed reading techniques, you will notice that. But you need, like with anything, and going back to basketball, you got to practice. Like this, getting your speed up to a high level takes practice. And there's areas that you need to work on, and you need to divide those areas up. Like, for example, if you're a basketball player, you need to work on your shooting, your dribbling, your defense, all that kind of stuff. And you also got to exercise the gym, work on your cardio, eat properly. There's a ton of things. And to be able to read faster, you've got to break it down into different sections, and that's what we do in our classes. We break it down into different sections, and you need to exercise all those sections and work on them, and then you're going to start to see the speed increase, and then you won't have the problem like comprehension has gone down because my speed has gone up.
And actually, it's interesting you mentioned that. We were just talking about multitasking, and the approach that we take in our classes to help someone improve their reading speed is very much away from multitasking, and it's single tasking. And by that I mean, Joe was mentioning there are different areas that you have to work on in your reading. Like when basketball, you've got offense, defense, and strength and conditioning. In reading, you have your speed, your comprehension, and your retention. And instead of trying to work on everything at once, which would be like multitasking, let's work on speed, comprehension, and retention all at once, we can't really do that effectively. So what we do instead is we take each area, we'll take speed, and we'll do drills specifically suited to helping someone improve their speed. And then we'll do drills for comprehension. And then we'll work on retention. And we work on each area individually, because by single tasking instead of multitasking, we're able to accomplish much more. And that's exactly what you do. Like when I was on a basketball team, that's what you do. When you're shooting free throws, you're not trying to also play defense. It doesn't even make sense. You just focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Now, another reading myth. Let's get to the next one. Speed reading is basically just skimming. Let's talk about this, Joe. First of all, Joe, do you want to explain what skimming is?
Skimming, from what I understand, is just reading bits and pieces of information here and there. So reading a few words on each sentence, and with the hopes that after reading all that, you get just the gist of the information.
Right, or maybe just looking at all the headings in a chapter or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? Now, speed reading, it has to do with increasing your overall reading speed. So you're going through this whole chapter, and you're going line by line, and you're trying to process information. So you're not trying to skip anything necessarily, unless that is your goal, unless you're trying to selectively read something. But you can use skimming. Nothing's wrong with skimming. It can be used strategically, just like speed reading can be used strategically. But speed reading is a skill that I think needs to be developed. And skimming is something that's a little more straightforward. I don't think it takes much developing. I think most people that are listening to our podcast here know how to skim through a chapter of their reading material.
Mm-hmm. And where this myth came from, is that in speed reading, there is words that you don't have to read, just like how there's punctuation that you can overlook, and little bits of information that are put in a sentence, for example, to make sense from a grammar's perspective. Right. So when a paragraph or when information is written down, it's written with proper grammar and proper punctuation, okay, and it's worded accordingly. Now, we don't speak the way that the information is when we read. So therefore, the information that's there that's not relevant, we don't have to take that in. in order to comprehend the information. So that's where this came from. And this is a little bit of an advanced technique. And once you start to get better at speed reading, you know when to pick up words and when not to pick up words. So, for example, if you're reading a sentence that says, "The boy jumped over the fence," okay, you could just read "the boy jumped fence," and you will get the same level of comprehension.
Or just "boy jumped fence" and dropping off the, right? I mean, you only need a few words to really transmit the idea.
That's why Paul reads at a higher speed than me, you see? Cause
you see that? You kept the there. No, and actually, it's not, for me, here's how I feel about it, because that habit of saying words in your head, this is another common myth that I've seen other speed reading programs talk about, and I don't, it bothers me that other speed reading programs say that you can completely get rid of auditory reassurance. I'm not convinced that you can, and actually, I don't think you would want to either. I think auditory reassurance is helpful sometimes. For those of you that aren't familiar, auditory reassurance is saying words in your head. Just about everybody does it when they read, and this is a habit that slows a lot of people down. So when you're trying to improve your reading speed, you're trying to do this less. You're trying to not say as many words in your head. Now, a lot of speed reading programs out there that I've looked into before I started developing the program, they would tell me you can break this habit and stop saying words completely in your head. Now, it's true. You can stop saying words completely in your head, but there's a problem with this, because if you don't say, it's useful to a certain extent because you're not all the words you see are familiar to you, or you don't see them all the time. So sometimes saying a word, let's say you're a law student and you're coming across new terminology, it's a really useful habit to say a word that you're not familiar with. New terminology, if you're a medical student, you're going to come across new terminology, and it's useful to say those words in your head. It's also useful to say them out loud. So when I'm reading a sentence like "the boy jumped over the fence," in my head, I'm still saying words in my head, but I'm not saying every single one. I'm going maybe "boy jumped fence," and that's what was said in my head, but I didn't say "the boy jumped over the fence." That would take a little more time. And the other words, I did see them, but I didn't really acknowledge them as very relevant to the meaning. And I think that's what you're trying to get at, Joe, right? With it, you end up, as you start training yourself, you start realizing, okay, here are the more important parts of a sentence or a paragraph, right?
Yeah, I mean, with practice, you'll automatically figure it out. The brain is very complex, and it knows what it's looking for, and it knows you've got to just trust it. And it'll zone in on the words it needs to pick up. Now, this happens with time and practice. And to add to that, the boy jumped over the fence is the visual aspect of it. I mean, when we read something like "the boy jumped over the fence," we automatically get a visual of a fence and a boy jumping over the fence. So, as soon as you read a sentence like that, when you read "the boy jumped over the fence," for example, you might not have auditory reassurance for "boy jump fence" also, because visually you'll take the word, you'll visualize. As soon as you see "boy," you'll visualize "boy," and as soon as you see "jump," you'll visualize "jump," and as soon as you see "fence," you'll visualize "fence," and you'll not actually be reading it. Right. Now, most of us, and I usually prove this to be the case because I do a show of hands in the start of the class, have experienced times when they have stepped away from auditory reassurance. There are certain types of material that you read when you get really into. Like, I read a lot of Malcolm Gladwell books and information by Malcolm Gladwell. I think he's a great writer, and he's a great storyteller, and the way he puts his information together, I slip out of auditory reassurance like very frequently because the information just flows really well. And it's, like I mentioned earlier, it's like a movie playing in my head.
Right, and you're anticipating what's coming next, too. You kind of know where and some of that has to do with how it's written.
Exactly. It's based on real life examples and examples that I already know, and it's bits and pieces of information that I'm already aware of. But the way it's written, the way it flows really well, so that your brain already knows, is already comprehending, and it's a few steps ahead of you, so to speak. And it'll take in only the information it wants to take in, or it needs to take in, and you'll be able to read at a higher speed. Now, that applies for that's the case with fiction material, or like very easy material. It flows a lot easier because you don't have to have as much auditory reassurance, because auditory reassurance is kind of like a comprehension tool, in my opinion, right? By reading a word in your head, it helps you comprehend better. If you can substitute comprehension from auditory reassurance with something else, such as visuals and other bits of information or like that, or other types of stimulus, then you won't need that to be the thing that you have to rely on to comprehend better.
Right. And you mentioned about visuals, and I like to point out, visuals, obviously, like pictures. We've all heard the saying before, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And if you're just picturing what you're reading and you're visualizing it, think about how much more comprehension you can get when you visualize it. Because, like they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. It's a lot of information coming across just by visualizing something.
That's a great point. And one of the things that we're big on at Iris is mind mapping and using visuals in general to help us with reading. Okay, so there is a way that you do that. And for those of you not familiar with mind mapping, check out the Mind Map book. I actually read it a few days ago. It's a great book. It's the first book written on mind mapping, put together by Tony Buzan, who coined the phrase mind map. And there's a ton of information in there. Check that book out. And I pretty much use mind maps for everything now, because it's just so much more efficient. I don't take linear notes anymore. I use mind mapping, and the reason why I find it to be so effective is because of the visual aspect, right? It's because mind mapping involves words and visuals. Okay, so just do a quick Google search, image search for a mind map, and you'll see an example of a mind map, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But having visuals and keywords, you're engaging more of the brain. Like, we've got our left hemisphere and our right hemisphere, and the left hemisphere is more responsible for linear note-taking and keywords in a linear fashion. The right side is more artistic. When we're reading something and we're not engaging the right side of our brain and allowing ourselves to visualize, we're not being as effective, right? You're only using half the potential. You should be trying to engage the full potential. So mind mapping and practicing using images regularly in the work that you do daily will help you when you read also, and it'll help you read faster too, because you're going to stimulate that part of your brain more. And when you do read, all that work you're doing, all the prep work you're doing is going to help you out, and you'll be able to visualize better. And then you're going to start getting away from stuff like auditory reassurance a lot easier.
Yeah, mind mapping is just supremely helpful. Some of the things you mentioned that you use it for a lot of things. I just want to point out some actual scenarios for the people listening in that I use it for. Task management, I find mind mapping very useful for task management. Like, for example, if you're a student and you're also working, think about all the tasks you have to do on a daily basis. You have your work-related tasks, and that could be one part of your mind map. But you also have tasks related to school. That's another part of your mind map. And you also have maybe personal tasks like paying bills. And I remember sometimes when I've got just a ton of things to do in a particular day, I like to kind of mind map it out, because then it gives me kind of like a big picture, like a bird's eye view. So task management, we use it actually here internally at Iris for brainstorming. If I was still a student in school, I'd be using it for note-taking. I'd have a mind map for every single one of my chapters, because at the end of the semester, if we have a test on the entire book, I can look back at every single one of those mind maps and really get a big idea of what that chapter was about and zone in on the more important details. Joe, I want to take a step back real quick. We're talking about auditory reassurance, how we say words in our head. And I want to give an example of when this is turned off for, I would say, just about everybody. Whenever you see dates in the material that you read, like what if you saw the date 1929? Think about, most people when they're reading, they do not vocalize that word. And it's not even a word, it's a number, right? 1929. That's a lot of syllables, and you don't really have time to, it's actually kind of a waste of time to, pronounce that whole word. Mm-hmm. I keep calling it a word. It's not a word. I know it's just a number. But 1929.
That bit of information.
Yeah, I like that. Let's talk in terms of bits of information. Joe, I know you can relate with this because you've got a big tech background, right?
Yeah, I tend to, whenever I teach these classes or just talk about speed reading in general, I tend to refer to, I prefer taking in information, bits of information versus the word reading, right? Because like I mentioned earlier, I find the word reading has a lot associated to it that is not serving us really well right now with in the information age that we're in. And I think where all this stuff is evolving to is a different way, a more effective way of taking in information. And we're already starting to see this as an example. If you look at text messaging and instant messaging, a lot of people don't write full sentences now. They smiley faces, emoticons, LOL, like acronyms and short form and stuff. It's like a whole new language is forming because the information is being presented. We know what it means, but it's not a full line of text, traditional style, right? So what I believe is we're kind of evolving past reading. I mean, I don't know if it's going to happen in this lifetime or whatnot. We're gonna evolve to more of taking in information through all our senses simultaneously, and that's going to be more effective. Now, how that's going to happen, I don't know. And
I have an idea for you, Joe. Here's what we're going to do. It's going to be like the Matrix, only you'll have a book in front of you, and you're just going to put your palm on it. You're going to put your hand on it, and you're going to suck all the information out of that book through your hand and into your head.
So it's kind of like
and we're working on it here at Iris in our laboratory.
I like to think we're playing a role in this kind of what is the cool, because that's what the whole Iris organization was built on, right? Was built on taking in information faster, right? I mean, speed reading is just the start of this. The goal here is time management and taking in information in a lot more. I keep saying taking in information. We have to come up with our own word for this.
We do. It's information intake.
And then we're gonna have to put it in Wikipedia so the word gets out.
There you go. We need to coin something. What are we gonna coin? Yeah. You know what? I was thinking it would be great. We'll have to do a podcast episode on this. Future reading in the future. It would be great if I could read while I'm sleeping. I would love to do that.
Here's the thing, okay? So the biggest thing that helped me when it comes to reading faster was not so much the techniques and strategies, even though they're important, but it was the paradigm shift, okay? And the paradigm shift is that we're in a time right now where there's a lot more information, and the truth is the faster you take in information, the faster you integrate it, the more success and the more fulfillment and the more enjoyment you're going to get out of life. That's the truth. Right now, there isn't a problem getting information. Information is available from tons of sources. It's not the problem anymore. The problem is how fast can we take that information in, right? So this is what it is. I
mean, before the printing press, how did people get information? Think about it. It was really tough, and whoever had the most information, maybe had the most knowledge, the most power. And actually now, if you have a lot of information, it really doesn't mean a thing. I mean, you could get hard drive upon hard drive and store terabytes of data. It doesn't matter. It's how you use that data, how you get through it, how can you find the golden nuggets or the diamonds in the rough that are important to you. And this is why I think you made a good point earlier. It's important to be selective about what you read. This is the big question that I like to ask material that when I'm reading. Is this worth my time right now?
Mm-hmm. And to add to that, I remember when the internet first came out and ebooks and documents that contained information, websites that had information started to become more available. I used to just hoard all that information, just take all those books and all the documents and throw it on my hard drive and just say, you know what, I'm going to read all this stuff. I'm going to go and I'm going to spend days reading all this stuff, and that's going to, and what happened? Every year that goes by, that information doubles and triples, and there's just right now that's not the problem. Like, I can get as much information as I want on a particular subject, but we want to be able to take in the most relevant of that information. We want to take it in faster. We want to comprehend it and retain it longer. So this is it's totally changed.
Well, here's the big difference, pre-printing press and now, information age. Tons of information versus little information. The big consistency is that we still only have 24 hours in a day. and it's important to how you use that time.
We at Iris haven't figured out how to increase the.
We haven't. We have not, unfortunately, figured that out.
We've figured out how to get more out of a day, though, which is the only thing you can't do. The only thing you can do.
Yeah.
I mean, you could. Here's the thing: when you get the paradigm shift, going back to the paradigm shift of, it's not about taking in more information; it's about being relevant and being more efficient at it. Then you're going to start to see that you can get way more done in a day. Okay, and by using tools like mind mapping and taking the speed reading classes and applying the techniques and strategies, you essentially buy yourself more time, and then you get more efficient with, for example, exercise. Now, there used to be a time when exercise routines that used to take like 60 minutes and an hour, 2 hours were really popular, and then they did studies to prove that, it's not really necessary, and now you can get a workout in 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, as long as it's very, very focused. Joe, I was talking to you about something that I've been doing lately is CrossFit. And it's all about how can you focus your time and attention on a very, very specific workout and get it done very, very quickly. Not be at the gym for 3.5 hours, and essentially it's all about discipline and focus. It doesn't matter if you spent a lot of time. Just because a college student, let's say you take 2 college students and one of them spent 3 hours reading a chapter and the other one spent an hour and a half, you really don't know who got more information. I would say the person in an hour and a half probably was more efficient about it. And actually, one of the things that we find is people that read faster, usually they have better comprehension because they're getting through the information faster. The people that are reading more slowly, the reason they're reading more slowly is a lot of times they're just distracted. They're going back and rereading material. So, and again, that goes back to that myth of, just because you're going slowly, it doesn't mean you're getting better comprehension.
Yeah, and that's a big thing right there, right? So, mental resources. What do you need to do? What can you do to focus better? Because that's a common thing when it comes to reading right now, and this is more of a problem now today. Focus is more of a problem now than it was before. Here's why: because with all this information being presented to us, and then all these gadgets like iPhones and iPads and Blackberries and stuff, we're constantly being bombarded with information from all different angles, and we think the best way to deal with it is to multitask, and that is not the best way to deal with it. Now we're starting to realize, and we're starting to see this more and more. They're coming up with more and more studies saying that multitasking is not as beneficial as we thought it was. It's not going to give you the result that you want. You're not going to get more stuff done. You're just going to have the appearance of getting a lot of stuff done, but it's the end result is you're not actually getting stuff done.
Joe, do you think this is the reason why Steve Jobs wouldn't allow the iPad to do multitasking?
Because he doesn't want to damage our brains.
He knows that single tasking is the key and the answer to life.
Yeah. Well, that's if you think about it.
It's funny he got criticized on that. When the iPad first came out, I know it does a certain level of multitasking now, but when it first came out, it did none. And I remember my first iPad, I would get a little bothered that, all right, I'm in this app right now, and I also want to browse the internet. And when I'm in front of my PC or my MacBook, the fact that I can open a tab is both good and bad. If I can open a tab in my browser, I can work on 2 things at once. And sometimes it's required that I have to. But sometimes I have way too many tabs open, and I'm working on 8 different things, and I can't remember the real reason why I turned my computer on to begin with, and what I really needed to get done, the most important thing. So.
Yep.
Again, we're going to have to do a podcast on focus because a lot of this...
And multitasking.
Exactly. Well, for example, I think a useful podcast, and for those of you that want to give us suggestions on what kind of topics you'd like to hear about, or if you've got questions, we will play them on air here. We'll answer them on air. And we've got a number where you could actually leave us a voicemail with that question. So the number is 315-313-4747. If you don't feel like leaving us a message, you could also email us. Just email us at podcast@irisreading.com. But we'll definitely do a podcast we'll do an episode on focus, on multitasking. When does it make sense to multitask versus when is it better to single task? But you know, Joe, one other thing I wanted to add to conversation you said earlier about distractions. The average reading speed over the last 30 years has actually gone down. It used to be common.
That doesn't surprise me, knowing that right now we're having all these focus and attention issues.
Yeah, and that's what I think it is, because here's the thing. I mentioned this in my classes all the time. 30 years ago, it used to be 250 to 350, the average reading speed. And now it's 150 to 250. Now, some people, there's a lot of arguments for why this is. Some people say that people are reading less. I don't buy that, actually, because people, remember how you said you got to change your, how do
paradigm.
you view, you got to change the paradigm of how you view reading. And when people say people are reading less, if you're talking about physical books, you're absolutely right. There are less people reading physical books nowadays. But part of the reason is because we now have Kindles and iPads, and we have computer screens, and we have all these other, or podcasts where you can get information in a variety of other ways. So the book is basically competing with a lot more mediums of information. So
yeah,
I don't
so basically
think
what we're saying is just listen to only our podcast and only our and read only our blog posts. That's what we're saying, right?
Kind of. At double speed in a chipmunk voice. Just to be twice as efficient, right? But to think about why this average has dropped, I would argue, and I haven't seen any kind of research on this, but I'd like to look into it. The average reading speed, part of the reason is it's dropped is because we have way more distractions now than you did 30 years ago. 30 years ago, if you were reading a novel, what are the chances that your cell phone's going to go off? What are the chances you're going to get the thought, you know what, I should check my email right now, or I want to check Facebook, or, all of these distractions are just non-existent. And now it's a lot tougher. I think it's a lot tougher to read now than ever before.
Yep, it really is. And that's why we cover all this stuff in the class. Like, we condense a lot of information in the workshops. And the biggest thing when I teach these classes, okay, beyond the strategies, beyond the comprehension, beyond getting their speeds up, is the paradigm shift. Why? Because the whole reason why students take this class in the first place is to get more time so they could do other things. Now, if we can give them something like, here's a way of thinking that will give you more time in the realm of reading, but you can take this information and apply it to other aspects of your life and get more time over there too. So overall, you have way more time and you're doing way more things in one day. Then that's my goal. Like that's what I aim for in every class. I love it. There's a certain point where everybody feels it. It's that paradigm shift, and they're like, oh, I know what's going on here now. I know, and that's when you actually start to see the speeds go up, right? Because then they start to say, oh, it makes sense to me. And then the brain, what does the brain do? It gets more efficient because you remove the restrictions.
Right. And, part of our class actually is just removing some of the skepticism, because when I first started learning about speed reading, I was extremely skeptical because I saw a lot of exaggerated claims. Where I remember, you'd see commercials of people flipping pages through a book, looking at a page for like 2 seconds, flip, another page, 2 seconds, flip. It didn't seem real to me. Now, maybe they were looking at a picture book, I don't know. But, this is one of the things that we've got to battle against in our classes. First of all, removing the skepticism and saying, okay, look, you're not going to go 20 times, 30 times faster, okay? Let's throw that out right off the bat. But what if you were to double or triple your reading speed? I mean, a real doubling or tripling of reading speed. And by that I mean you've doubled and you actually understand what you're reading, or you understand more and you're remembering more. That's a real gain that we are trying to get here. Now, I want to move on to our last reading myth here. It's, if I don't understand and remember everything the first time through, then my comprehension is bad. And this is something that I hear all the time from students where they feel like, I didn't get everything. They just read a 50-page chapter in their textbook, and they feel like I didn't understand it all. Now, first of all, no one's going to understand it all the first time through. It's just not going to happen. So it shouldn't be an expectation to begin with. And I feel like that's one of those myths with reading, that someone feels like there are some people that feel like unless they've memorized the material, their comprehension wasn't great. it's unfortunate that some things have to be, you have to read them more than once maybe, or some things have to be, think about reading as just one part of the learning process. I mean, when you're in school, you're reading, but you're also attending lecture, right? You're also having discussions with people. You're having tests, you're having assignments. All these things are part of the learning process. So it's not just reading something one time and being done with it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, I think we've covered all our reading myths here, and one of the things that we want you guys to do, those of you that are listening in, if you have questions, again, give us a call and leave a voicemail. This is just a voicemail box we set up specifically for the podcast. You could ask us a question. We'll cover it during the show. It's 315-313-4747, or you could email us at podcast@irisreading.com. One other thing just to kind of close out, remember, for those of you that are in we're doing classes now in 21 cities, and you can check out the schedule at irisreading.com, and also check out Joe's blog. It's over at speedreadingzone.com. Joe, what are you working on today in terms of the blog?
I'm actually working on this post on mind mapping, and it's a lengthy post, and I'm on day 2 of this post. I want to give like a really detailed post, so I'm working on that right now. One thing, save yourself 25% on your next Iris speed reading class by entering speedreadingzone.com as the promo code, and also check out my blog and get some good information there too.
Right. And that promo code, by the way, also applies to, we just launched an online course. So for those of you, I mentioned we're in 21 cities, but if we're not doing a live class in your city, you could still check out our class. It's recorded entirely, and we have it available online. Again, go to irisreading.com for the articles Joe is talking about. Check out speedreadingzone.com. And thank you all for joining us today. We hope you liked this episode. And get in touch with us. Subscribe through iTunes or your RSS feed, however you're doing it. And thank you all again, and have a great day.